Hello, I'm Charlie Brooker and you're watching 2014 Wipe, a programme all about things that happened in 2014, and what a year it was.
Oscar Pistorius somehow managed to avoid a murder charge.
He was known as the Blade Runner, although he's actually more like the Terminator because he's got metal legs and he shoots people. There were upsetting scenes on the Great British Bake Off as a furious owl man scraped his pudding into a bin. I haven't seen that much hot cream being dumped into a mucky box since I hacked your parents' iCloud account.
There was disturbing coverage as PR guru Max Clifford mimicked a human outside the court where he was on trial.
Clifford was a well-connected, silver-haired man who claimed to be able to fix it for people. What could have seemed less suspicious than that? And somehow Scott Mills managed to avoid controversy despite blacking up on Strictly Come Dancing.
All right, listen to me. The human world, it's a mess. Life under the sea is better than anything they got up there.
But we'll get onto all of that in a bit. For now, let's commence, as tradition and indeed common sense dictates, with January.
As 2014 began, Britain was bracing itself for invasion, just like in the good old days of World War II. This time, we weren't going to be overrun by Nazis, Vikings or killer wasps, but Romanians, or Bulgarians, or both.
All Bulgarian and Romanian citizens will be free to live and work in the UK from today.
Yes, reports suggested that foreign Romanians and Bulgarians, fed up with what the news depicted as their rubbish medieval homeland, where the sole source of entertainment is driving over the nation's one speed bump, were apparently set to flock to Britain in droves. I don't even know what a drove is, although it's probably some kind of Romanian boat made of dirty foreign sticks. Not everyone was happy about the influx. Chortling, boozy frogman of the people Nigel Farage was convinced too many were going to come here.
I don't know how many are going to come. The best estimate has been put up by Migration Watch, which is 50,000 people a year for the next 5 years.
50,000? We don't have room for that many. What are we going to do? Breathe in? We should go over there and send them back to where they came from before they can leave. Come the day itself, the government stationed Keith Vaz at Luton Airport in a desperate bid to ward off any incomers. And as the first plane from Romania arrived, in they came. All one of them, a bloke called Victor in a green hat. And he was insisting he only wanted to work.
I don't come to rob your country, I come to work, and you open the border. I come to work.
Well, you're not taking my job. Speaking of which, I think my show's actually on at the moment.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Go away.
Oh, you bastard. Interestingly, as well as meeting Vaz, Victor was greeted by Tory MP Mark Reckless, who was so appalled by the sheer number of immigrants he'd seen flooding in with his own eyes later in the year, he emigrated to UKIP. Anyway, around the same time people were pissing their pants over floods of foreigners, the nation was having far more bother with an actual, old-fashioned, traditional flood.
Tonight at 10, more extreme weather on the way with strong winds and very high tides.
Yes, in the words of Mr. Dapper Laughs, Britain was proper moist as a merciless deluge of raindrops threatened to turn the country into a particularly shit reboot of Venice. The sea apparently had decided to take a gap year and go travelling around places it didn't belong, such as the land. And any immigrants who had come over here were probably regretting the decision, although they did seem to be making the most of it.
I think we are getting better in this, you know. Now we have more experience.
Typical. Coming over here, breaking our brollies. Over in the USA, meanwhile, they'd completely eclipsed our extreme weather with some extreme weather of their own, the polar vortex, which made Narnia look like the Bahamas. Some amateur scientists soon discovered that if you stood outside in these freezing temperatures and lobbed a load of boiling water into the air, it turned into instant snow.
The magical results filled screens everywhere.
And it soon transpired that boiling water plus idiots equals the keys to Chuckle Castle. Also in January, Channel 4 pioneered a new TV soap opera which caused 1,000 years of shouting. Benefit Street.
Welcome to the No Joke World.
Benefit Street was, depending on how you looked at it, either a cynical punching down attempt to goad the public into booing a set of hate figures, or a searing and heartfelt expose of the troublesome life of an underclass many would prefer to ignore, with ad breaks. It was broadly sympathetic. The main trouble was the name, Benefit Street, a dog whistle title tailor-made to trend on Twitter and wind people up.
Other equally subtle titles they probably rejected included The Great British Sponge Off, Deride and Prejudice, Downturned Scabby, Tweetbait Sink Estate, What the Paupers Say, and Strictly Scum Chancing.
The end result was a feisty debate culminating in Channel 5's opportunistic Big Benefits row, which brought some much-needed incoherent bellowing to the cultural conversation.
My CV's gone everywhere. My CV is everywhere. My CV is everywhere.
Well, that's that cleared up then. Having settled the welfare state for good, harmony was restored and Channel 4 continued its proud tradition of public service broadcasting.
I wonder if I will miss him when he's not here.
My Buggy Body, after Benefit Street.
Later in the month, following a nighttime road race in Miami, melodic pipsqueak Justin Bieber briefly went from world's most desired pop star to world's most wanted man. His disarmingly cheerful mugshot was all over the media and he was condemned as a bad influence.
In astonishing scenes, one Brazilian TV host was so outraged he held an on-air protest in which he improved Bieber's latest CD with his foot.
Vou nem esperar o intervalo comercial. É agora mesmo. É agora mesmo. Aqui para esse CD do Justin Bieber, ó.
But this wasn't the only showbiz gaffe of the year, no, because in February, during a staggering American news interview, a news anchor mistook Samuel L. Jackson for Lawrence Fishburne.
Did you get a lot of reaction to that Super Bowl commercial?
What Super Bowl commercial?
Oh, you know what? My mistake.
You know what? See, you're as crazy as the people on Twitter.
Right.
I'm not Lawrence Fishburne.
That's my fault. I know that. That was my fault. My mistake. You know what?
We don't all look alike.
Oh, what a ridiculous mistake to make. I mean, here's Samuel L. Jackson and here's Lawrence Fishburne. Totally different. Racist. Meanwhile, the world was shocked by an outbreak of what resembled 14th century combat in the present day in Ukraine. Or the Ukraine. I never really know if it's the Ukraine or just Ukraine. Maybe that's what they're fighting about. Suddenly, news channels were brimming with unpleasant footage of a standoff between the government and pro-EU campaigners who were turning the centre of Kiev into a cross between Mad Max and a live performance of Stomp that had spiralled completely out of control. Actually, it's really out of order, this, isn't it?
March was enlivened considerably by the glitzy annual backslapping festival, the Oscars. This year's ceremony was hosted by Ellen DeGeneres and was chiefly memorable for one particular moment in which she gathered some stars together for a selfie, the end result being sadly only the second most viewed image of Jennifer Lawrence available this year.
One of the big winners this year was 12 Years a Slave, a harrowing epic which brought home the misery of slavery by making you sit in a chair for 3 hours until it was over.
There was this really good sort of film thing called 12 Years a Slave. I wasn't sure I'd understand it because I haven't seen 1 Year's a Slave or 2 Years a Slave or any of the others, but it turns out that didn't matter because I didn't understand it anyway.
The main bloke in it was a violinist, right? And he was really good at violinism, like Nigel Kennedy. But unlike Nigel Kennedy, he ran off to join a circus and accidentally joined a farm instead. And not just any farm, but like the harshest farm ever.
They all had to collect like bits of cloud that had got stuck on trees, which sounds like a really nice job from a fairy book, but actually looked quite knackering.
The people they worked for were really out of order, like in that film Horrible Bosses.
I'm not saying this lightly, because it's a big label to put on someone, but I actually think some of the boss people in it were a little bit racist. They kept treating him like shit, and you're like, tell him to shove the job, mate, but he never did.
Eventually the main bloke goes, sod this, 12 years a slave is enough for me. I can't hack it anymore.
It was good they made it, but they didn't really need to because they don't have racism in America anymore. When they voted for Obama, they sorted all of that out, drew a line under it. These days, America's changed and black people can be whatever they want to be, as long as it's either president or shot.
Also in March, Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 unexpectedly went missing somewhere over the ocean.
Air disasters are always big news. This one was bigger than most because the whole thing was also a genuine mystery.
Sky News resorted to running a kind of on-air guessing game with a room full of experts placing their bets on a map of the sea like roulette crossed with battleships, while Fox wondered how long the search would take considering how much time other mysteries took to solve.
So it took us, 100 years to find the Titanic? It took us 2,000 years to find Noah's Ark?
Yeah, it took us 2,000 years to find Noah's Ark, but then mythical boats don't usually show up on radar.
Speculation reached its nadir with Channel 5's opportunistic The Plane That Vanished Live, fronted by no more an authority than Donald McIntyre.
It's the mystery that's baffled the entire world. What has happened to flight MH370? Tonight, the question everyone wants answered
won't be answered.
The show itself featured international correspondents who didn't know where the plane was, a terrorism expert who didn't know where the plane was, a psychologist who didn't know where the plane was, a man who looked old enough to predate air travel itself who didn't know where the plane was, and an air accident investigator who didn't know where the plane was.
I know you don't wish to speculate, but your best guess?
It's very difficult to say because we've got no evidence.
Yeah, well, no one needs evidence when there's brilliant speculation to be had.
Was it pilot suicide, a new Bermuda Triangle? Could it have been a rogue missile or even alien abduction?
No. In April, there was a jolly nice story about a jolly nice young man called George.
Yes, the world's media joined Killiam as they went touring down under with the Joffrey It's OK to Love, Prince George.
Mum and Dad had a packed itinerary. They headbutted the locals, met some plebs, did some swinging, made direct eye contact with a man doing a shit, enjoyed the Australian remake of Mrs. Brown's Boys, and were underwhelmed by a rock. But no one really cared about them. The person they really wanted to see was Wickle Prince George. And just like any other royal, the news found his every move inherently fascinating.
Prince George attended his first public engagement today, and he wasn't mucking about.
Yes, he was.
He wasn't afraid to assert himself. But then that's perfectly normal for an 8-month-old boy.
So's crawling, which he probably learnt from you. Afterwards, parents of other less regal and therefore ultimately unimportant infants were asked how they'd found their encounter with the superior baby.
He sort of took control, went into the middle of the circle of toys. He hunted out the biggest toy, propped himself up, and yeah, he owned the place, basically.
That's because he does own the place. And you, and your kid, whatever it's called. It's not royal. Don't see why I should give a shit. In May, Jeremy Clarkson became a star in a massively sized fracas. Yes, Top Gear presenter and professional controvergonk Jeremy Clarkson stood accused of using the N-word. And by N-word, I don't mean Nissan.
The roots of the outrage lay in this apparently innocuous sequence from an old Top Gear in which Clarkson had to choose between two motors.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a teacher by his toe. When he squeals, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
But wait! An incensed Daily Mirror had uncovered alternative footage of Clarkson's eeny meeny act in which they said Clarkson used a racially offensive word, although the man himself was on Twitter saying he hadn't.
So it was Clarkson's N-word against theirs, but who was right? Only one way to find out. Eeny, meeny, miny...
No! Clarkson was now dick deep in trouble, and as Sky News made dazzlingly clear, everyone wanted to talk to him.
Hello, is Jeremy there? It's just Adele from Sky News, wondering if you might come out for a chat.
Eventually, amongst growing calls for him to be sacked, Clarkson issued an eeny-meeny apology, apparently filmed in a surface station toilet.
Please be assured, I did everything in my power to not use that word.
Oh, I know how he feels. I'm doing everything in my power to not express what I think about that.
That I'm sitting here begging your forgiveness...
while shitting.
...for the fact that obviously my efforts weren't quite good enough.
He's never going to make the honours list now, except maybe as a knight who says nee. By now, the news was filled with people saying the N-word.
He says he is mortified he had used the N-word.
The N-word.
The N-word. The so-called N-word.
Which meant the one place you could unequivocally hear the word itself being spoken aloud was in your own mind again and again, because I don't know about you, but every time someone says the phrase, the N-word...
N-word.
N-word.
N-word. N-word.
My brain auto-corrects it like a racist iPhone just so I can understand what they're saying. So while this was in the news, my internal mental readout resembled a collision between hardcore East Coast hip-hop and the screenplay for 12 Years a Slave.
That wasn't the only media storm for Clarkson this year.
There was an inflammatory licence plate, and he was criticised for using the word slope to describe an Asian man on a bridge.
There's a slope on it.
It's funny because it's racist.
Hey, do you remember being particularly happy this year? Me neither. But apparently, we were.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say.
It all began when celebrity hat stand Pharrell Williams' song Happy went viral. Deceptively bland at first, infuriatingly catchy after 2 listens, the toe-tapping clap-along earworm was taken to the globe's heart, probably because unlike everything else in 2014, it expressed an emotion other than soul-crushing terror.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof.
This up-tempo reboot of If You're Happy and You Know It, Clap Your Hands quickly became unavoidable, with irrepressible happiness belting out of every radio, tinkling away in the background in every clothes shop, leaking from the headphones of the maniac sitting beside you on the train, and tootling from the radio as you accidentally reverse over your dog. There was no respite from the happy onslaught online either, as people uploaded videos of themselves being happy here, happy there, happy every pissing where. In especially happy scenes, Pharrell himself, dressed as the Ranger from Yogi Bear, was shown footage of the universal outpouring of happiness he'd inspired on Oprah, and his eyes did an emotional wee.
Why am I crying on Oprah? Well, if that upsets him, imagine how he'll feel when he finds out that rooms have ceilings and not roofs.
But hang on, amidst all the global YouTube revellers was a number of Muslims sharing videos of themselves dancing in a bid to overturn negative media stereotypes, and the news made clear that amongst them was a group of fun-loving Iranians who'd uploaded their own version, Happy in Tehran.
With disastrous consequences.
You all know the song that has become a global anthem for optimism, Happy by Pharrell?
Know it, I can't escape it.
Well, some young fans from Iran decided to join the movement. Their irrepressible joy met with an ominous show of force.
They rounded up and arrested the 6 dancers and the filmmaker.
Yeah, well, they don't like Pharrell in Iran. They prefer Shariah Carey.
Throughout May, all the political parties were campaigning for the local and European elections being held at the end of the month. Although, as Channel 4 News made clear, not everyone was interested.
Do you know about this by-election?
No, I don't.
Well, the local MP, Patrick Mercer,
Yeah.
had to resign over a bit of scandal.
Yeah, that's right.
And so there's a new election now.
Right, okay.
Will you be voting in that?
No, I don't vote nothing.
You don't vote nothing?
2 men who were interested were Nick Clegg and Nigel Farage, who drummed up interest by going head-to-head in a pair of live debates about Europe.
If it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is.
Sounds too good to be true. You know, that reminds me of the time 100 years ago in 2010 when a younger, pluckier Clegg took part in debates with the Gruffalo and Iggle Piggle. Back then he was the wild card, the exciting outsider fighting the system, the voice of ordinary people, Barack Hussein Clegg, bright-eyed embodiment of hope.
Now, you're going to be told tonight by these two that the only choice you can make is between 2 old parties who've been running things for years. I'm here to persuade you that there is an alternative.
Now, just 4 years later, here he was, the company man, tainted goods, defending the closed shop against a new wildcard man of the people outsider, albeit the kind of outsider who thinks the country's got enough outsiders already. Part of Clegg's trouble is that as soon as you're part of the system, you're not a man of the people anymore, you're not relatable, and you don't even seem human. For instance, Robo Cameron, the Optimus Prime Minister, consistently exhibits alarmingly stiff gestures and arm movements like he needs oiling. He also has an odd habit of abruptly walking out of shot the moment he's had enough of talking to the media, or uploading information to the pleb cloud, as he probably thinks of it.
I think that is important.
Where's he going?
Those are the things we'll be discussing here today, and I'm hopeful of a positive outcome.
Well, come back here, don't just walk off with your hands in your pockets. Jesus Christ!
Right now, the key thing is getting everything done that we can in the next few hours to protect as many homes and communities as possible.
Once the army's gone, thank you, Prime Minister.
That was David Cameron there.
It was late for a bus by the looks of it. But Labour's Ed Miliband has the biggest image problem. Throughout 2014, poor old Miliband, a man with the face of a rubber ear and the voice of an enchanted plimsoll, looked and sounded awkward in every setting he appeared in. It's like he's been badly photoshopped into our world, and the more he strains to look normal doing everyday things, the less normal he looks.
He looks at odds trying to drink a pint in a brewery.
Great.
He can't eat a bacon sandwich without looking like a man who's been neck-nominated to eat a live bat. He can't even look viewers of insipid breakfast TV in the eye without coming across like a slightly frightened robot. He's the only man on Earth who manages to visibly shift uncomfortably in a still photograph.
Into this void have poured people who were once considered fringe figures and are now hailed as a fresh solution, chief amongst them being UKIP. The odd thing about UKIP is that unlike the other parties, every gaffe they commit seems to make them stronger, and throughout the year they guffed out gaffes like a gaff-guffing garrison. One of their sponsors claimed women shouldn't wear trousers.
Why should women dress to excite men?
Because that's the only way the world is going to continue. If they don't, then men are going to stop them.
When Lenny Henry complained about a lack of diversity in British television, which, speaking as a black woman, I thought was a ridiculous claim, one UKIP candidate said he should emigrate to a black country.
He told me if black people come to this country and don't like mixing with white people,
then why are they here?
Haircutted UKipper and tough pub quiz answer Mike Reed caused a stink when he sang a calypso in a cod West Indian accent.
Inadvertently creating the most controversial record in which a white man pretends to be black since Blurred Lines.
Open the borders, let them all come in. Illegal immigrants in every town. Stand up and be counted, black and brown.
It's funny because it's racist. Given all this, little wonder whenever ubiquitous Nige wasn't on screen guffawing over a pint, he was saying sorry for something, anything, over and over again.
I regret the fact that I was sort of completely tired out, and I didn't use the form of words in response that I would like to have used. Somehow, somebody in UKIP has made a very major error. This is our fault. It's the party's fault. Hands up. This kind of behaviour is unacceptable and it must never happen again.
UKIP leader Nigel Farage apologises in person to the Thai woman described as a ting-tong by one of his MEPs.
But, you know, mega apologies.
Yet despite all this, UKIP's popularity continued to grow, and come the elections, they cleaned up.
The UK Independence Party celebrates a dramatic breakthrough in the European elections.
Even the pinko lefty BBC felt compelled to celebrate Nigel's birthday live on air like he's an emperor or something.
It is Nigel Farage's birthday today. He's 50 today, so happy birthday to Nigel, happy birthday to Nigel.
But who knows how long that'll last, since Farage the alternative outsider is already being challenged by another alternative outsider.
But this man is not a cartoon character. He ain't Del Boy. He ain't Arthur Daly. He is a pound shop Enoch Powell, and we got to watch him.
Usually politics is really boring, but this year it got more interesting because it had Russell Brand in it. It was good because when politicians talk, they use all this boring language normal people don't use, that you can't understand. But he cut through all that by talking in Victorian.
And the phrase that these women have come up with, social housing, not social cleansing, is incredibly germane, incredibly apposite.
He's like a sort of cross between Jesus and Rise of the Planet of the Apes. He said how rich people like him were shit and we shouldn't listen to him, so I didn't know whether to listen to him or not, but he was fucking everywhere, so it was really hard not to.
Then he brought out a book called Revolution about how unfair everything is, and so you'd know he meant it. He pulled a serious face on the front. It was about how catapultism is naughty and how we could build a better world if we were nice to each other instead of spending all our time thinking about coins.
Energy companies are subsidised by our taxes while renewable energies are ignored. I know you can't support that system, Evan.
He'd talk about how the status quo keeps the working classes enslaved, which I found sort of boring compared to the stuff he used to do about putting his dinkle into granddaughters. What he's saying might actually be stupid, but it's hard to tell because he says it with clever words.
We don't want pedagogic figures coming in and didactically shouting at us.
So the only people who can actually tell if he's stupid are clever themselves, and they think everyone's stupid compared to them anyway. Basically, the only way to find out if he's clever or stupid will be to do everything he says and see if society totally collapses and hundreds of thousands of people die.
Also in May, the BBC attempted to rally the nation with When Corden Met Barlow, in which National Treasure James Corden met National Treasure Gary Barlow in a bid to solve the mystery of how they both became national treasures.
The end result was a dispiriting road trip in which Barlow did all the driving. I mean, he could have got a cab, but he prefers to avoid taxis. It was shot weirdly too, at times almost like a sort of odd couple romantic comedy in which the two leads sadly never kiss. Sometimes it was like watching an episode of The Royal Family or a Creature Comforts animation before they put the plasticine in.
What's been your proudest moment?
I've got to say the OBE, haven't I, really?
It's a good day.
It has been the ultimate occasion, hasn't it?
It was a good day.
Yeah.
The best bit happened after, really, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because I'd made a stew at home.
Right.
So we raced home, we got the award, done the pictures, raced home, we all tucked into this stew that I'd made earlier, wolfed it.
Although he is an incredibly accomplished musician, this is my favourite one of his.
Look at that, total concentration. I mean, he's boring, but he's focused.
Gets good in a minute.
Probably still thinking about that stew, look at him.
Any minute now. Seriously, stick with it. It's going to get good. Good bits coming up. I know how to improve this.
Just add a bit of Ukrainian stomp.
Sorry, I completely forgot what I'm meant to be doing. June heralded the glorious World Cup, the global festival of kickery-pokery. The sheer magic of football was apparent from the offset, with players flying in amid swirling allegations of FIFA corruption to be greeted by a traditional Brazilian street party. Then in surprising and powerful scenes, Luis Suarez caused outrage when he was caught biting an Italian man on the shoulder from behind, like your dad did in the Navy. 2014 will perhaps go down as the year the internet no longer seemed like quite such a benevolent presence in all our lives. I mean, for years we were like, oh look, it's full of kitten pictures. But this year, lurking behind almost every unpleasant event was some kind of online origin story.
Trolling, harassment and online misogyny were constantly in the news. Celebrity photographs were stolen and shared, and Sony Pictures suffered the most merciless hacking since Janet Leigh in Psycho.
Then, of course, you had terrorists using the internet. Yeah. I suppose I've got to talk about ISIS, if that's what you even call them. I mean, I don't know if they're ISIS or ISIL or just IS, which I suppose is sort of vanilla ice.
The unfolding horror show that is ISIS has its roots in a terrorist group once commonly known as Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which in June declared a worldwide caliphate or global Islamic state, claiming to represent Muslims worldwide.
But sadly, this lot put the hate into caliphate.
The group seen here training in a sort of terrorist version of Crufts appeared to be rapidly gaining ground throughout Syria and Iraq and made its presence felt globally online with a series of videos depicting nigh-on medieval brutality, including some in which hostages were beheaded. These videos were packaged to be spread, even including a gruesome trail identifying the next potential murder victim at the end. ISIS videos slot perfectly into a Western news narrative already overflowing with negative stories about Islam.
In fact, the news actually assists the group, not deliberately, but as a side effect.
ISIS draws much of its strength from its flashy propaganda, and the bind the news media finds itself in is that each time it reports on the latest atrocity, it also helps promote it. The coverage feels like one long ISIS showreel, everything from posturing videos to ominous images of Beetle John, literally given a rock star nickname, accompanied by awestruck accounts of his ruthlessness. It all becomes spectacle, draped in the visual language of fictional thrillers, an accelerating viral cycle.
And the terror spreads and spreads and makes ISIS seem more powerful and the rest of us more powerless.
Do you know who this terrorist is?
No. This sense of ever-expanding madness has been unfurling all year, not just with ISIS, but with Russia and Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, Ebola, mistrust with politicians, with institutions, with the media, with cultural icons. There's chaos in the USA, chaos in Hong Kong, chaos in the news studio in Jordan. At times, the news has been so chaotic, the newsreaders themselves don't want to turn up and read it. Even seasoned reporters are chickening out live on air.
Nicholas, what does it say?
Against this sense that everything's sliding out of control, it's hard to know what to cling to or even what's going on. Here's a personal view from documentary filmmaker Adam Curtis, the man behind The Power of Nightmares and the forthcoming Bitter Lake, on the chaos that seems to be engulfing everything.
So much of the news this year has been hopeless, depressing, and above all, confusing. To which the only response is, oh dear. But what this film is going to suggest is that that defeatist response has become a central part of a new system of political control. And to understand how this is happening, you have to look to Russia, and to a man called Vladislav Surkov, who is a hero of our time. Surkov is one of President Putin's advisors and has helped him maintain his power for 15 years. But he has done it in a very new way.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
He came originally from the avant-garde art world, and those who have studied his career say that what Surkov has done is import ideas from conceptual art into the very heart of politics. His aim is to undermine people's perception of the world, so they never know what is really happening. Surkov turned Russian politics into a bewildering, constantly changing piece of theatre. He sponsored all kinds of groups, from neo-Nazi skinheads to liberal human rights groups. He even backed parties that were opposed to President Putin. But the key thing was that Surkov then let it be known that this was what he was doing, which meant that no one was sure what was real or fake. As one journalist put it, it's a strategy of power that keeps any opposition constantly confused, a ceaseless shape-shifting that is unstoppable because it's indefinable. Which is exactly what Surkov is alleged to have done in the Ukraine this year. In typical fashion, as the war began, Surkov published a short story about something he called non-linear war. A war where you never know what the enemy are really up to, or even who they are. The underlying aim, Surkov says, is not to win the war, but to use the conflict to create a constant state of destabilized perception in order to manage and control. But maybe we have something similar emerging here in Britain. Everything we're told by journalists and politicians is confusing and contradictory. Of course, there is no Mr. Surkov in charge, but it's an odd, non-linear world that plays into the hands of those in power. British troops have come home from Afghanistan, but nobody seems to know whether it was a victory or whether it was a defeat. Ageing disc jockeys are prosecuted for crimes they committed decades ago, while practically no one in the City of London is prosecuted for the endless financial crimes that are being revealed there. In Syria, we are told that President Assad is the evil enemy, but then his enemies turn out to be even more evil than him. So we bomb them, and by doing that, we help keep Assad in power. But the real epicenter of this non-linear world is the economy. And the closest we have to our own shape-shifting, postmodern politician is George Osborne. He tells us proudly that the economy is growing, but at the same time, wages are going down. He says he is cutting the deficit, but then it's revealed that the deficit is going up. But the dark heart of this shape-shifting world is quantitative easing. The government is insisting on taking billions of pounds out of the economy through its austerity programme. Yet at the very same time, it is pumping billions of pounds into the economy through quantitative easing, the equivalent of £24,000 for every family in Britain. But it gets even more confusing, because the Bank of England have admitted that those billions of pounds have not gone where they are supposed to. A vast amount of the money has actually found its way into the hands of the wealthiest 5% in Britain. It has been described as the biggest transfer of wealth to the rich in recent documented history. It could be a huge scandal, comparable to the greedy oligarchs in Russia. A ruthless elite siphoning off billions of public money. But nobody seems to know. It sums up the strange mood of our time, where nothing really makes any coherent sense. We live with a constant vaudeville of contradictory stories that makes it impossible for any real opposition to emerge, because they can't counter it with a coherent narrative of their own. And it means that we as individuals become ever more powerless, unable to challenge anything, because we live in a state of confusion and uncertainty. To which the response is, oh dear. But that's what they want you to say.
There was this Australian man called Rolf Harris who'd come over to Britain years ago and hung around for ages like Australians do, working as a sort of odd job man for the entertainment industry.
He was an other people entertainer, in that you always assumed other people found him entertaining, when actually he wasn't. Anyway, he was sort of quite popular until this year, when it turned out that as well as doing his entertainment, he was a criminal.
He'd committed all these terrible crimes years ago and then escaped from the past and tried to get away with it by hiding in now. But luckily they caught him.
Now, you might have noticed there were a lot of depressing stories this year, so to counteract that, here's some funny music. Right, now for Ebola.
This unpleasant shoelace is Ebola, a terrible, highly infectious disease that's ravaged some regions of Africa, causing untold misery.
It's a grave concern in the affected countries, but is very unlikely to spread in the West because we've got an infrastructure that should be able to cope with it. We also have the luxury of publicly worrying about Ebola in an entertaining way.
In Mississippi, for instance, parents began taking their kids out of a school after a rumour the headmaster had just returned from a completely different part of Africa.
Principal Lee Wannick just returned from his brother's funeral in Zambia, far from the Ebola hotspot countries on the other side of Africa.
Really, the only people at risk outside Africa were health workers returning from disease hotspots, hence the small number of isolated cases. Unstoppable American blowhard super tit Glenn Beck showed his audience how difficult it was for health workers to avoid contamination by donning hazmat clothing himself and getting some lackeys to simulate the challenge of tackling Ebola symptoms.
Yeah, you tasked me with coming up with a way of simulating the projectile vomiting and explosive diarrhea.
This largely involved flinging the contents of an entire Italian buffet complete with full chocolate pudding course at him.
Not that the average Joe needs all that protective kit. One US news network lucidly explained Ebola isn't necessarily that easy to catch.
You have to come in intimate contact with it while the person is infected. Now, if you came across some strange mucus or feces or something out there on the subway, the street, or anywhere else, don't eat it.
But only until this all blows over. After then, knock yourself out. Later in the year, Ebola was linked to a sudden re-emergence of the Band-Aid virus that had laid dormant for years. This was an attempt to recreate the successful formula that had previously ended hunger, made poverty history and brought peace to Africa.
A huge crowd of pop stars I don't recognise queued for their turn to sing into a table tennis bat, including Bono, who hadn't actually been invited. He was installed on the song automatically from Apple's iCloud.
Tonight we're reaching out and touching you.
Normally, when someone pops up holding a bucket and talking about charity, you do your best to avoid them. But there was no avoiding them this year, even if you put the bucket on your head, which was sort of the point.
This is the Ice Bucket Challenge, raising funds and awareness for ALS. I nominate Jamie Curry, Catherine Jamelli, and Beyonce.
The concept was simple. Mention the cause, nominate 3 mates to copy you, empty a bucket of iced water over your head, and lob the result on YouTube.
It was fun, and it was ubiquitous.
Of course, it didn't really count until celebrities got involved, and before long, the great and good could be found online in a series of internet videos.
It all looked like good, clean, famous fun.
Everyone had a go. Tom Cruise, Benedict Cumberbatch, Steven Spielberg, Cilla Black, even Ed Miliband joined in. Simon Cowell, no stranger himself to pouring cold water on people's dreams, had fluid sloshed all up his back on the deck of a yacht, which is the first time that's ever happened.
Or shucks warmongering hell-wraith George W. Bush tried to wash the blood off his hands with a dousing.
He was into the Ice Bucket Challenge years before anyone else, although back then he called it waterboarding. But the bucket-chucking fun had its pitfalls. Over-enthusiastic members of the public, who earlier in the year had failed to remember that boiling water is hot, were now failing to appreciate how heavy a container full of water can be. Before long, there was a spate of videos raising awareness of neck injuries instead. Palestinians also got in on the act with the Rubble Bucket Challenge, in which the object was to raise awareness of the situation in Gaza by tipping a bucket of smashed-up building rubble all over your head.
That is really terrible. Everyone should understand this is no joke here.
Also in August, the final gasping repercussions of 2012's glorious Olympic legacy dribbled onto BBC One in the form of celebrity gymnastics contest Tumble.
Your host, Alex Jones.
It's Saturday night, and this is Tumble.
Jesus Christ, what is it with these simple programme titles? We've had Splash, Jump, now Tumble. What's next? Plop? The first event was clearing the impossibly low bar the BBC had set itself, and accepting that challenge were a galaxy of stars, including H from Steps, a.k.a. Ian Watkins. And just to be clear, he's the Ian Watkins it's still OK to like. Although he is testing that to the limit, if I'm honest. Watching what amounted to celebrity forward rolls and a level of spectacle you wouldn't crane your neck gently to watch if it was happening behind you while you sat in a deck chair, it became apparent this was a format they should really have been saving for the months and years after the apocalypse. Interestingly, that is the precise opposite of an act I once saw in Bangkok.
Police have searched the home of Sir Cliff Richard.
The BBC tried to do this new kind of celebrity reality show crossed with the bill. What they did was they started searching famous people's houses on TV, people who hadn't been arrested or charged with anything. They had all cameras outside and they flew over in a helicopter so you could tell what a building looks like from the air when there's police inside it that you can't see. It was sort of like Extreme Through the Keyhole, where instead of thinking, who would live in a house like this, you were thinking, how the hell is this allowed to happen? Which is an interesting new spin on it. After it went out, the reviews were terrible, like people said it was worse than Tumble, and they got loads of complaints. I don't think it'll get another series, to be honest.
In September, millions of people were asking themselves one simple question. Am I Scot or not? Yes, porridge-scoffing super northerners, the Scottish, went to the polls to decide whether to get divorced from the English and leave Britain to go and live in Scotland. The main thrust of the No campaign was a series of ill-founded doomsday scenarios. Scotland would lose the pound, RBS would go and live in London, it would snow all the time, even indoors, Duncan's horses would turn and eat each other, Nessie would die of rabies, Mothra would attack Dundee, and God herself would hammer the mountains flat and delete the taste of iron brew from their memories. Whereas the Yes campaign largely consisted of hope, yearning and a bunch of vague wishes held together with sticky-backed patriotism.
Both sides attempted to bolster their arguments with big-name backing. Among the political heavyweights supporting the Yes campaign were former identical twins, Frankie Boyle lookalikes and hiking enthusiasts, the Proclaimers.
We're voting yes for independent Scotland because we want to see a fairer and more just society.
Talk about breaking up a familiar union, you two don't even look alike anymore.
The No camp had strong support from John Barrowman, the least Scottish Scotsman since Condoleezza Rice.
Not long after my family immigrated to America in the mid-70s, we were invited to be the special guests of a Burns supper in South Dakota.
Call me ignorant, but I didn't realise he was born in Glasgow. I always thought he was manufactured by Mattel.
I am Scottish. I do have an opinion, and I do have a voice.
Yeah, usually an American one. J.K. Rowling gave £1 million to the No campaign, instantly prompting some carefully considered conversation on social media. For instance, Twitter user System Overload said, "Get J.K. Rowling tay fuck, her books are pish. Got a specky bastard, a ginger and a squeaky wee bitch fucking about way wands. Wits up where that." Wits up indeed. Politically, the debate was personified by Alex Salmond and David Cameron, both of whom gave countless impassioned speeches making the case for their side. We can't recount all of those speeches here, but cut-and-paste collaborators Cassette Boy have boiled down the essence of everything they said into one handy musical package which starts when I bang my head on the desk.
Independence. What a difference. The lesson is a simple one, of better days to come. No longer run from London. We intend to win this referendum.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome and bang the drum to keep our United Kingdom as one. We cannot change forever the way our country is run. Because I believe in Team GB, but believe me, I love Scotch whisky. That's really what it's about for me. Some people have advised me to push Alex Salmond in the North Sea. It will be easy.
Well, not really. Who would you rather have representing this nation? A coalition devoid of any vision. People who never travel north of King's Cross Station, or Scotland could be an independent nation.
My argument today is we want you to stay in the UK. That way, Scotland has to stay in our national club.
In the club. Would rather go straight to the pub.
A life in Scotland is no life at all.
Better than living south of Hadrian's Wall, where quality of life continues to fall, thanks to the Philistines of Whitehall.
The sight of that man makes me sick. We all know living in Scotland is catastrophic. Home of the drug addict or the alcoholic.
David Cameron, you are a Westminster dick.
And I tell you now, Scotland is ours. We won't keep our vow. They won't get more powers. We will not finish what we have begun. Scotland will be going back to square one.
When the polls close and the voting has been done, could it be the end of David Cameron? That's the main reason to say yes, to speak out against the forces of darkness.
I say no.
We know to vote yes.
As the vote neared, a shock poll suddenly put the McShits up a previously complacent Westminster. Even experts found it hard to know what to make of some of the poll results, especially if they were watching CNN.
A survey of 6 polls says ultimately the answer will be no, but it's close. You see the numbers, 52 to 58%.
Good old CNN, accurate reporting, 26 hours a day, 17 days a week.
Lots of last-minute promises were made about what would happen if Scotland voted to stay in bed with Britain, a list that read like a desperate late-night text from a boyfriend who just doesn't want to be broken up with. Scotland could have more tax-raising powers and England would make it breakfast every morning. Scotland could borrow the car at the weekend. England would fill the dishwasher like it had promised to.
Eventually, the No Camp got so desperate they dug up former PM and haunted butler from a horror movie, Gordon Brown, hoping some of that warm nostalgia we all share for 2010 might help.
In the end, the No campaign won by 11 points on a genuinely impressive turnout of 85%, the highest for any vote since Series 3 of Big Brother. SNP leader and the automatic pilot from Airplane, Alex Salmond, resigned, and Scotland went back to McNormal. In October, ITV2 broadcast Release the Hounds, a staggering new game show in which hapless contestants had to solve horrifying puzzles, culminating with an astonishing challenge in which they attempted to outrun a pack of hungry dogs in a sort of cross between Total Wipeout and the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques.
But oddly enough, that wasn't the most controversial show on ITV2 that month. No, that'd be Mr. Dapper Laughs. Dapper Laughs started out as the brainchild of former estate agent Daniel O'Reilly, who uploaded a series of 6-second vines in which the titular Mr. Laughs shared the contents of his brain, which sadly often ran out before those 6 seconds were up.
6-second sex secrets. When you're giving us a blowjob, don't keep eye contact. Not sexy. It gets a bit awkward. Stop looking at me!
He was an estate agent from Clapham, saying the sort of thing you imagine an estate agent from Clapham says to amuse other estate agents from Clapham. The tragedy was the rest of us could see it too.
Welcome to management training for beginners. Always connect with your staff. Talk about social things. At weekend, Steve, loads of beers. What was you up to, Susan? Sucking dick.
As well as sexism, there was also cheap homophobia.
Never eat bananas around gay men.
Wait, I like pussy! And some material that veered into what you might charitably call ill-advised territory.
If you know the trick to getting the bra off quickly, she's yours. Turn around and lift up your fucking shirt.
That is terrible. Although, if you ask me, the most offensive thing is he's filmed all of this in the wrong orientation. Turn your f***ing phone sideways, Laughs! Given that, it was perhaps surprising when ITV2 offered Mr. Laughs his own dating show.
They've only gone and given me my own ITV2 show. Hey, yay! Dating's out and pulling's in. Dapper!
Anyway, before long, Dapper Laughs on the Pull was on the air, a sort of makeover show in which the oily tit attempted to transform awkward, insecure men into lady killers.
Come to pimp your penis. How you doing? All right?
All right, yeah.
Look at this thing. Jesus Christ. No wonder you can't get no means. Your face looks like one.
Now, on the face of it, there's only the faintest pube of difference between Dapper Laughs material and that of fellow ITV2 face Keith Lemon.
Smash her back doors in. Destroy her. I would ruin that.
Difference is, while the character Keith Lemon is clearly a preposterous, non-threatening dick, the character Dapper Laughs seemed to be actively celebrating crass laddism, and he was appearing in a show in which he gave advice to real people.
Don't talk to the bird at the end of the bar.
And he couldn't be an ironic character, surely, because the bloke who played him wasn't middle class, and only middle class people do irony because they're sophisticational and better than plebby chimps and that. But then shit got real. Dapper got into a spat with a website, some of his followers piled in with misogynist abuse, and soon a full-blown Twitter storm was raging. And when a murky video emerged in November of him digging himself even further into a hole, the game was well and truly up. Now, as far as the media was concerned, Dapper Laughs was radioactive dog shit, and ITV2 showed they'd learnt some pulling tips when they pulled his whole show. He'd smashed it, the shit out of himself. He was hanging out the back of his own career. He was proper hoist on his own petard. But his punishment wasn't over because he hadn't said sorry yet, which is why an embattled Dapper appeared on Newsnight dressed as a 50s beat poet for a stern telling off at the hands of Emily Maitlis, who echoed his own material back at him to see if he found it quite so chucklesome when it was being recited during a revival of Kafka's The Trial starring himself.
When you say you're giving advice to men on the pull, and for example you say get your gash out to women, can you deny that that would encourage men to do that on the street?
It's not the first time Maitlis has tried her hand at a bit of stand-up. Back in 2008, she delivered some of Frankie Boyle's material to former Director General Mark Thompson.
I'm now so old, my pussy is haunted.
And if you enjoyed that, don't forget to catch Emily Maitlis on her forthcoming live tour. Anyway, in the space of a few months, Dapper Laughs went from being the king of 6-second carry-on lad bants to battered, shat-out, festering carry-on.
Dapper Laughs is gone. I look at it now and I'm trying to, at the moment, hold back the emotion that's attached to what it's done to my life and what the media have done to my life in the last 4 days. I didn't realise I was causing that much of a problem.
It's quite a sad story, really. My eyes are getting proper moist. To lighten the mood in November, ITV decided to release one more hound as opulent melodrama Downton Abbey bumped off the unfortunately named family dog Isis. Cool, you know what? IRA the cat must be shitting himself.
I'm going to sleep in the dressing room tonight. I'm not cross, I just want to have her with me.
He's got balls, telling his wife he'll be spending the night with some bitch he's just picked up.
He knows.
Then lay her here between us, and she'll know she has someone who loves her very much next to her.
This emotionally charged three-in-a-bed dogging action wasn't the most shocking bedroom scene on ITV this year. That'd be the heart-rending moment in Coronation Street when Hayley Cropper necked a pint of death juice and gave Roy a cheeky handjob on her way out.
I love you.
There was this comet which lived miles away in space, and these scientists were trying to land a probe on it so they could find out more about it, like what it was made of and if the weather was nice there, that sort of thing. The science people are all in the control house looking at computers, and then when it landed they were really happy, which was lovely to see.
Then the probe sent back these sort of selfies, which everyone said were amazing, even though they were in black and white. It was all just rocks, like no trees or waterfalls or even like, I don't know, a horse by a pond in the background.
Anyway, the news coverage was really great, totally comprehensive. They'd spoke to all the science people who'd done it, and one of them was this science man who was wearing this sort of rude shirt with all drawings of ladies' bums on it.
Possibly the water, the 50% water ice we find on a comet, could have been a delivery mechanism to the Earth.
People on the internet said he was a bit silly, and then they said he was a bit wrong, and then a bit bad, and then sexist, and then oppressive and horrible and disgraceful and totally and unforgivably evil, and that he should apologise. And so the next day he did.
The shirt I wore this week, I made a big mistake and I offended many people, and I'm very sorry about this.
It was sad to watch the way it looked on the news. Normally when people the internet doesn't like issue an apology, they're still not forgiven, because the internet's sort of like a killing machine. It can't forgive. But this bloke cried, and when he cried everyone felt sorry for him again, so things calmed down and went back to normal. And then there was someone else to hate, so we did that. Can't remember who that was. Could have been anyone.
While America tore itself apart over black oppression, Britain tore itself apart over Black Friday, a sort of official capitalist reimagining of the 2011 August riots. Yes, in what looks set to become a depressing tradition, shoppers stood in line waiting for retail outlets to open their doors for a headline-grabbing set of one-day-only offers, reciting what they wanted like a consumerist mantra.
An Xbox. I'm after TV.
I'm after a phone.
The anticipation was so great, some people didn't even know what they wanted. As ITN made abundantly clear, they just knew they had to come.
You don't even know what you might be getting.
No, till I have a look. They said that there should be something in there, but they wouldn't say what over the phone.
Chillingly, it's a sort of real-life consumerist parody of George Romero's excellent consumerist parody, Dawn of the Dead, in which zombies flock to a shopping mall for reasons they don't understand.
What are they doing? Why do they come here?
Some kind of instinct, memory, what they used to do. This was an important place in their lives.
As the doors opened on Black Friday, it wasn't long for the whole thing to come crashing down, sadly, along with customers.
In surreal and alarming scenes, which might as well have been sponsored by online retailers to convince you to shop online instead, ordinary Britons stampeded into shops to punch 52-inch televisions off each other so they could take them home, hang them on the wall and ignore them while gawping at their phones. It's sad, really. Now they've commercialised it, the true meaning of senseless violence has just been lost.
Little wonder as Christmas loomed nearer, some people were afraid, none more than this poor woman who suffers a festive phobia and who was tormented by Yuletide imagery as part of a pioneering experiment on ITV's This Morning.
So here's some footage of a snowman. You're up to 140 now. And how does that make you feel? 145, 146, 147, 148. Heart rate is increasing to 150 now. All right, that's enough. Let's take that off.
Equally disturbing were some of the Christmas ads.
Yes, noted humanitarian movement and supermarket J. Sainsbury plc unveiled the glossy tale of a perfectly good war ruined by a tragic outbreak of football. There they are, our ancestors, shivering in the frosty trenches, or the frozen isle, as Sainsbury's call it, waiting to shoot their 5 a day or get killed, body bagged for life, as Sainsbury's call it, when they call off the hostilities in favour of a kick-around. Anyway, once the game is over, they presumably go back to slaughtering each other and dying in wretched agony, scenes Sainsbury's have left out for reasons of taste the difference. Some said that placing a supermarket logo over a recreation of a real-life killing field was an insult. Others said it was a tear-jerking tribute to a generation of young men who laid down their lives so we could all enjoy 3 for 2 on tender stem broccoli.
But perhaps the most unsettling Christmas ad was this startling presentation in which TGI Fridays unveiled a mistletoe drone designed to make diners kiss one another and maybe temporarily forget the nightmare dystopian future they're eating onion rings in.
But as an alarming US news report made clear, the festive kissing fun was short-lived.
A recent promotion at a restaurant in Brooklyn, let's just say, didn't go as planned. It involved a drone carrying mistletoe, flying around trying to get couples to kiss.
Yeah, cute idea, but then the drone ended up crashing into a woman's face.
It seemed to cut a little part of her nose off because the blood was gushing.
My date's got no nose. How does she smell? Crying. Well, that's about all we've got time for. As you've probably noticed, it's been quite a challenging year, one containing an ever-growing sense of dread. There's been plenty of reasons to be fearful in 2014, but hey, let's not make a song and dance about it. No, actually, let's.
An ever-growing sense of dread. An ever-growing sense of dread.
Reasons to be fearful. 14. Constant global crisis, Syria to ISIS, rising living prices, we can't cope. Rolling news is leering and looking on and cheering, and Danny Dars appearing in our leading soap. Historic crimes admitted, Pistorius acquitted, dapper laughs transmitted, shop floor war, online woman hating, gamer bloody gating, and below the bread on dating on Channel 4. Violence unending, iPhones bending, Ian Botham trending, hashtag verbal diarrhea, annex in Crimea, and a spider in the ear of Katie Melua. Telly actors mumbling, no marks tumbling, our social order crumbling while people snigger. Sony facing hacking, MPs backing fracking, and Clarkson facing sacking for saying naughty words. Reasons to be fearful. 14. Reasons to be fearful. 14. Reasons to be fearful. 14. Reasons to be fearful. 2014. Reasons to be fearful. 14. Awful fear and dreading, Ebola virus spreading, Clooney's bloody wedding and that damn song. You two uninvited, UKIP all delighted, and everything Mark Wright did all year long. Corruption in the city, Scotland getting splitty, Woody couldy diddy, that's no joke. Porridge for Rolf Harris, Miliband embarrassed, Cameron was harassed by a random bloke. Devastated cliff face, choppers over cliff's place, baked Alaska misplaced, feelings hurt. Solange attacking Jay-Z, Atmos looking hazy, and Twitter going crazy for an ill-judged shirt. Brooks Newmark with a hard-on, Boko Haram, her continued stardom, Jeremy Hunt. Russell's evolution contains no solution, he's untouched by evolution, the ape-like chap. Reasons to be fearful. 14. Reasons to be fearful. 14. Reasons to be fearful. 14. Reasons to be fearful. 2014. Yes, yes, dear, dear, but hey, next year, perhaps things might get better. I'll prepare that case. Reasons to be cheerful. 15. Reasons to be cheerful. 15. Reasons to be cheerful. 15. Reasons to be cheerful. 2015. Let's try looking forward, beyond West Norwood. Maybe things will turn good in months to come. Economies recover, we all embrace each other, and the love will spread like butter. And your mum. More Peter Capaldi? You might go on holiday. The bargain bin at Aldi's full of cheap beer. You can do some voting in new royal baby dating. Oh shit, I'm sugarcoating. Back to fear. Battlefields burning, stomach always churning. Benefit Street back to Series 2. Every day up early, Nigel Farage and Kay Burley, belligerent and surly on Sky News. Another coalition, parliamentary repetition, hatred and suspicion every day. Apocalyptic weather, going hell for leather. That's the end for this year, now go away.